Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us here on CBS News 24/7. I'm Lindsay Reiser. We continue to cover the tragedy just outside our nation's capital, the first commercial airline disaster in the U.S. in 16 years. Search and recovery efforts are underway following a deadly mid-air collision between a military aircraft and a regional American Airlines plane last night in Washington. The National Transportation Safety Board is on the scene as emergency crews search the Potomac River to find crash victims. 60 passengers were believed to be on board the American Airlines flight, along with 4 crew members. Several U.S. and Russian figure skaters were on the plane when it crashed. Additionally, 3 soldiers were on board the military helicopter. Officials say roughly 30 bodies have been recovered so far, including all 3 soldiers. This video, courtesy of EarthCam, the one we're about to show you, shows the moment of collision. The jet, we're told, was on course. Here's that video, approaching Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport in Virginia after departing from Wichita, Kansas, just 2 hours earlier. NTSB Chairperson Jennifer Homendy discussed the investigation.
We are all here because this is an all-hands on-deck event. And we're here to assure the American people that we are going to leave no stone unturned in this investigation. We are going to conduct a thorough investigation of this entire tragedy, looking at the facts.
Skyler Henry was at the press conference and joins me now. Skyler, what more are we learning after today's briefing about how they will go about their process? Because they told us they were frank. Today is the first full day for them on the scene, and they can't be divulging any facts about the case yet.
Yeah, and that also includes getting in front of any sort of speculation that we have seen, not only on social media, but also from members of the Trump administration. And so they say that they will be taking their time. As you pointed out, this is their first full day assessing exactly what happened. Interesting to note that they say that they have yet to recover any of the so-called black boxes on either of the aircraft, the commercial regional jet or that Black Hawk helicopter. They also say that they have yet to get to the flight data recorder, which is underwater, and that is the other component to this that is so unusual, Lindsay. Just the fact that this was a water emergency and that crews are not only dealing with trying to obviously recover as many of those bodies as possible, but also really try to get to the bottom of exactly what happened here, knowing that the conditions are treacherous and the initial parts of this effort and these efforts were all happening under the cloak of darkness in those cold, chilly waters of the Potomac River. They also talked about what methods that they will be taking moving forward in terms of this meticulous process to try to reconstruct exactly what happened and if there was any sort of fault at all. They say that they will be looking through a series of groups, working groups. They say that there will be a structure group, a systems group, a helicopter group, given the fact that a military helicopter was involved, but also a human performance group as well. And that's interesting because I asked one of the board members, Lindsay, about that earlier today. Earlier today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth referenced that mistakes were made last night. And so I asked whether that meant human error or if there was some sort of mechanical failure. But of course, as I pointed out before, they did not want to get in front of any sort of preliminary findings. They did say that we should see something happen here within the next 30 days as far as their initial findings and reports. But a part of that human performance group, they say that they will take into consideration what was going on with the pilots of both the commercial regional aircraft as well as the military aircraft as well. We also heard that there were apparently recording devices on the military helicopter that could lend a hand in terms of getting to the bottom of this investigation. And there are also reports out there as well speculating about what was happening inside of air traffic control and whether that was properly staffed or if there were other people that were needed given the types of aircraft and the amount of operations going on here at the airport during the time of the collision. And so they say that they do not want to get in front of any of that at this point. But they say that they will continue to update us as quickly and as thoroughly as they can. And they also point out that everyone, as far as next of kin, has yet to be notified. They are still working to try to brief families, some of whom are still making their way to Washington, D.C., in order to get briefed as to what exactly happened here. They did say that they, in some cases, make arrangements so that family members can make their way to the collision site. In this case, what would be the bank banks of the Potomac River. But they say that there are still people still trying to make their way here to Washington, D.C. They've yet to contact everyone as it relates to next of kin of those who may have been on board as well. We should also point out, given the fact of who at least we have come to identify as far as passengers on board those aircraft, we know that there was a figure skating component. Some of the top figure skaters out there from both the U.S. and from Russia. President Trump alluded to that earlier today during that press briefing, and also talked about how he and the United States would be responsible for getting those remains back to Russia. He also said that there were some other passengers on board those aircraft that were from other countries. We are yet to see exactly where they are from as well, but it just goes to show just how much work is left to do as crews and all of these administration and organizations work to really try to get to the bottom of what happened.
Skyler, they said that right now they are still in active recovery mode, but you had mentioned the flight data recorders, the black boxes on the helicopter. Those still have yet to be recovered, but also other kinds of evidence, including debris and even cell phones. What did they say about that?
Yeah, they said that they were going to be sensitive as it relates to passengers' cell phones and also their personal belongings and how that could help with this investigation and sort of putting the pieces together. But they also said that what they noticed as it relates to the fuselage of the commercial regional jet was that it was broken into 3 pieces. That's something that we heard from officials within the Trump administration earlier today, as well as other officials who made that initial press conference here at the airport. And so they say that both the aircraft, the American Airlines aircraft, as well as the military aircraft were flipped upside down. They also talked about the challenges given the space in this investigation because of that Potomac River that I talked about. Not only is the river rushing at this current moment, but it is still cold. It did snow here recently in Washington, D.C., and so crews are working around the clock to not only gather, as you pointed out, and try to recover as many bodies as possible, but as much evidence as possible as they look to reconstruct exactly what happened here.
Skyler, they were asked about whether there was any indication of whether anybody made it off of the plane. What was the response?
Yeah. Well, they said, and echoed the same sentiments as the D.C. fire chief earlier today, just given the conditions, at this point, they haven't been able to determine whether anyone was able to make it off of the aircraft. They say it was almost an instant collision, and the fact that it happened the way it did, it was almost improbable, so to speak, to imagine that anyone could have survived the impact of this crash. And that's something really that takes your breath away, Lindsay, when you think about it, given the fact that that American Airlines flight was so close to landing here at the airport, minutes away even, and the fact that, at least from earlier reports, every indication has said that we're talking about hundreds of feet as it relates to altitude. And so because of that, they say that given the circumstances, given the impact and how quickly everything happened, it was pretty difficult to imagine that anyone could have survived what happened here last night.
Such a tragedy. Skyler Henry, thank you for your reporting. Let's go now to Tom Hanson, who is at the Ashburn Ice House, where he's been speaking to the tight-knit community there about some of the people who were believed to be victims of the crash. Tom, what are you learning so far about some of the passengers?
Yeah, well, what we're learning, Lindsay, is that we're having a slow trickle of names that we have been able to confirm as CBS News. And I just want to kind of give you a rundown of the people that we do know for a fact were on this flight, this doomed flight. Jenya Shishkova, Nadim Namov, they were world-class figure skaters who were reportedly on this flight. Spencer Lane, a 16-year-old, and his mother, Christine Lane, they also died in the crash, and that is all according to the Skating Club of Boston. And then, not every single person on this flight, however, was an ice skater. One person, Azra Hussein Raza, a 26-year-old, was among the victims of the crash. She was on a work trip to Wichita. That was confirmed by her father-in-law, but there are still so many people on this flight that we have not been able to confirm independently independently just yet. And so we are waiting for those confirmations to continue coming in. As you've mentioned, over 60 people were on this doomed flight that crashed into the Potomac. And so, here at this skate club, Ashburn Ice House, a place that has been deeply impacted by this devastating loss. We've seen the constant trickle of people coming in, many of whom have flowers in hand to pay their respects in a makeshift memorial. People who are just sobbing and crying and shattered. And I just want to outline exactly the tight-knit community that we're looking at here. We are talking about people that not only compete together, they travel together, they study together, they train together. And so they are spending a lot of time together. And they also know a lot of other skaters from across the country. This is something that spans not just the DC area, but from Boston and elsewhere in Virginia. So we're talking about people who are experiencing grief and loss that they are just beginning to grasp in the early hours of this tragedy. Lindsay?
Do we have any sense, we know we just heard from the NTSB press briefing that the Washington, D.C. medical examiner will be releasing names and identities of the victims. Do we have any sense of a timeline on when that will happen?
I mean, as we heard from Skyler Henry earlier, just outlining the challenges that that first responders are encountering when it comes to recovering some of the bodies from this crash, it's really anybody's guess. We're getting a slow trickle of information that we are then being tasked with verifying independently, as we should as a news organization. And so, it's really unclear when we're going to get a full list, but we are still in the very early phase of identifying just every single person, every life that was lost from this devastating crash. And I can tell you that, we're waiting for answers where we are. The people who are coming in here and coping with this loss, they are also waiting for answers. As of now, we are very much in the early phase of that, Lindsay.
Okay, Tom Hanson, thank you. While I was discussing with Tom, we did get word. CBS News confirms via two sources that one air traffic control worker was managing helicopters and planes, a job normally done by two people. This was first reported by the New York Times. We are obviously going to have much more on our live coverage of the Reagan National Airport crash. Our coverage continues next. For now, we're going to take a break. You're watching CBS News 24/7.